Free agent quarterback Colin Kaepernick has yet to speak publicly since he opted out of his contract with the 49ers at the end of the 2016 season. In a statement to our NFL insider, Josina Anderson, the chairman of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which works with the NFL to support a more diverse and inclusive league, is asking Kaepernick to change that. He said, quote, "I, John Wooten, chairman of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, asked Colin Kaepernick to stand up and speak to the American public as to why he originally took a seat during the playing of the national anthem. Then, after speaking with Nate Boyer, took a knee. Tell the American public what you told Eric Reid was your reason and intentions. It is time to put an end to how your intentions are being used to further divide the people of our country. Colin, you are the only one who can speak from your heart. Players all over the NFL need you to speak out. Stand up, Colin. We are listening and waiting impatiently." For more on this, let's get it back to First Take.
Tony, thank you. Appreciate all that information there. So, Stephen A., essentially, John Wooten is saying it's time for Colin Kaepernick to stand up and speak. Do you agree?
Totally. He's absolutely right. And John Wooten has reached out to me personally and has expressed this for the last several weeks. A friend of his, somebody he confides in by the name of Drew Carter, based out of Chicago. He's constantly cognizant of these issues. He pays attention to it. He emails me all the time. And I do listen to this because they make profound points. I had callers call me up yesterday on my radio show on ESPN Radio talking about how Colin's done enough. They talk about how Colin has been going to schools and speaking at high schools and things of that nature and taking questions and doing Q&As with folks. That's good. That's fine and dandy. And Colin Kaepernick is to be commended for that. He's to be commended for his courage. He's to be commended for his political consciousness. He's to be commended for all of that. But he also has to take into account the fact that when you're doing those things, but it's in the dark and nobody knows about it, essentially what it appears to be, from an optics perspective, to use Max's words, is that you've got others out here fighting the fight that you instigated, that you precipitated, and now you're nowhere to be found. If Colin Kaepernick just walked away and had no interest in playing in the NFL or anything like that, it would be different. But this is the same Colin Kaepernick that's on the record saying that he would no longer kneel for the national anthem, which begs the question, why are guys kneeling now? This is the same Colin Kaepernick that was looking for a job in Miami and in Baltimore before things fell through, okay? So one would wonder whether or not he still holds firm to his positions. I know he's tweeted in support of Eminem, for example. I know he's tweeted in support of others, and we get that. But in terms of his ability to articulate the message, particularly considering what Coach Herm Edwards brought up in our earlier segment, when he highlighted how at the time Colin Kaepernick was the wrong messenger, well, he would be the right messenger now. I'm not saying that he needs to stand front and center and take the bull by the horn and shove everybody aside. But if you've got warriors fighting on your behalf, you don't need to come across like the dude that instigated a fight and then ran when your boys came to jump in and help you. You need to be right there front and center fighting, particularly since you're the one who instigated matters, which is why I completely agree with John Wooten's point.
Colin Kaepernick, look, everyone would like to hear him talk. I'd like to hear him talk, too. But he may not feel comfortable as a public order. I mean, there are different, correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, there are leaders in the locker room who lead by example, right, and there are vocal leaders. And maybe Colin Kaepernick is not comfortable as a vocal leader. That said, ultimately, I do agree with the point here, because there's an old expression, you don't choose your profession chooses you. In other words, and we all know that's not always the case for everybody in terms of opportunity and everything, but the idea is, if you have opportunity, that what you're really good at is going to come out. And whether or not Colin Kaepernick wanted this or asked for it or feels he is cut out for it or best suited for it, the fact is he is a leader on social justice in this country right now. And so his behavior has been has fulfilled that role, but he hasn't yet spoken as extensively as people would like, as publicly as people would like. Stephen, I know we'd love to have him on this show, not to be like too crass in terms of the commercialism of it all. But of course, we'd like to have him on this show and talk to him, and I'm sure others would as well. And at any rate, people would like to hear him speak, even if, and by the way, he's imperfect. Stephen A., you got on him for not voting, as did I. I thought that was a bad mistake and a bad example to set, as though there's no difference between the candidates. And I was insulting about what he understood about the issues. When I heard about that, I was incensed. I didn't like the pigs on the socks. I felt like it was an expression of emotion at the time that must have felt gratifying, but in the end was immature and counterproductive. I didn't like the Castro T-shirt. Even though he's with Malcolm X, and I understand there are ancillary issues there in terms of the way I view it that are also important, that for Colin Kaepernick may be central issues. So I'm not saying he has to be perfect or he has to speak perfectly, but he is a leader in social justice at this moment, and I would like to hear him speak.
I think we'd all like to hear him speak, and I think he owes it to the players in the National Football League that has followed his lead. He started a movement. He started the movement. Now, how he handled it in the beginning was a little bit sketchy at times, but I think now that he can reflect on what has transpired, his voice could bring it back to actually why he took a knee. He would have a platform where people would listen now. They'd actually listen to him again, and he could explain his point, why he took the knee. By the way, he was told by a person that was in the service, right, to take the knee.
That's right. That's the most respectful way to do it.
It's the most respectful way to do it. Now, we can disagree or agree, it doesn't matter. But just to reflect now, he's been away from it almost a year. To go back and say, when I first started this, I did some things wrong. But this is what I'm doing now. To let people know, like Stephen A. said, what he's doing now. And he's doing a lot of things now. And there's a lot of players that have followed his lead. He had started the movement. And it'd be nice just to hear his voice.
Well, what I said to the guy on my radio show yesterday, Coach, was, listen, I can appreciate him talking to kids and doing Q&As and doing all of that stuff and being incredibly enlightening. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, everything about that is right. The flip side is that how many folks know about that? And when you have what has morphed into a national movement, particularly on a part of what appears to be almost a collective body of African-American players throughout the National Football League, and even the locking of arms while standing to honor the flag that's being done by NBA players. Because I was at the Lakers-Utah Jazz preseason game at the Staples Center. I was at the Clippers, Portland Trailblazers game at the Staples Center. They were locked in arms. I'm saying even that is residue from Kaepernick. Could you imagine the kind of criticism folks will take if indeed Colin Kaepernick comes back and says, well, I'm not interested in kneeling for the flag and gives no explanation. He just wants a job in the National Football League. I'm not saying that it should impact it because the cause is the cause. But the critics, the naysayers, the people that would be against him would now have an excuse, even more so, to be against those players, which is why it's that much more important why he stands front and center and makes sure that these guys aren't doing what they're doing in vain, even though they were late to the party, even though they waited until Trump called them SOBs. The bottom line is what they're doing is related to what he did, which means he has something to do with that. So to be in the dark, laying around in relative silence to some degree is the equivalent of instigating a fight, and then your boys come in to help you, and then you go and hide while they're there fighting. Can't do that.
I would hope if he decides to come out and speak, he would just say this, and this would bring it all back in together, would tie it. The emotion that our country, whatever side you stand on, whether you kneel or you stand about the flag, if these emotions would be used for social change, we could actually change it. That's all he would need to say.
End the segment on that. Well said. Herm, appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When we come back, the Chris Furster story has been in the headlines all week. But now the woman who released the video is speaking out. You'll hear from her in a bit. We'll get the fellow's reaction on that. And while Isaiah Thomas is happy to be in the land, he had some parting words for his former boss,